mean, there does seem to be an edge of irritation. There does seem to be a kind of running out of patience. I don't know if you would agree that that's equally on the Prime Minister's part as those quizzing him on this, John.
I don't think I detected quite as much impatience as you're suggesting. I think the Prime Minister was trying to get across a very powerful point that in the case of Albania, which was a big issue not so long ago, they have taken positive action and it seems to be working. And obviously the MP interlocutor wanted to speak over him before he finished his point. That's not unusual, but I don't think it means there's some new testiness.
She said you're very keen to mention Albania. How about the keenness or lack thereof to mention Rwanda, which seems to have been just kind of bubbling beneath the surface for so very long now without a single person being taken there by plane or any other means?
Well, indeed. And the Prime Minister would agree that that is very disappointing. It isn't for want of trying by the Prime Minister and relevant ministers. There have been a series of legal blocks, which they were not expecting because they'd taken legal advice, I presume, that implied that what they were doing is perfectly legal. And in the most recent case, of course, they won in the High Court, and then there was a split judgment in the Appeal Court, and they are now saying they're going to take it to the Supreme Court. I think also they need to press on with the legislation. And of course, the Lords haven't been very helpful about that. And I look forward to the Commons sorting that bill out once again, because we're told by the Prime Minister and the Home Secretary that will help the position. It shows they remain determined because they are seeking to legislate, given the blockages that some of the courts are creating.
Do you think the Rwanda solution is a good one, a practical one, a humane one, or a very expensive one that maybe is only intended to apply to about 200 people, even if it were to be considered legal and to be effected?
Well, it's one of a range of actions they're taking, and I think what the government is saying is that if it becomes a feasible option as they wish, you won't need to use it very often because people will be deterred from making illegal entry at great risk and at considerable expense to themselves if they think that the result of that would be that they'd be sent somewhere else where they haven't chosen to go directly, although it's a perfectly safe country. But you also got to take it in the context of a range of other ways they're going to handle this. I think I put even more store by their wish now to help and persuade the civil service to greatly accelerate decision-making. I think one of the scandals in all this has been this huge build-up of undecided cases and the big fraud in productivity in considering them. And I'm very glad that action is now being taken, because I think people who come here, those who come by illegal means included, should be told very quickly, although after proper research, whether they have any case or not.
I couldn't agree more, but is this an instance, John, of the government blaming the civil service? Is it the civil service's fault and responsibility that there's been this logjam? Is it their fault?
Well, the people who have to take ultimate responsibility, we all know, are the ministers. That is the system. I see nothing wrong with that. But I think it is a matter of concern that we've known that ministers for some time have been very clear in signalling their priority, and they say that they've been willing to commit more people and more resource, and it hasn't yet worked in the way that it should. So let's hope it now does. As I understand it, this is not resource constrained. The ministers are not saying you can't have more people or more money. They're saying we want to put the right number of people in. But we do need to get back to the levels of case consideration that officials were capable of a few years ago, because it's fallen away a lot.
Sir John, it's Peter Cardwell here, political editor. I just wondered how optimistic you are that people will be sent to Rwanda, either in the short term or at least by the 4th of January 2024, the anniversary of the 5 pledges. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think any of us can tell, because this has been a story of a lot of political will and ministerial intent, but also an awful lot of resistance from various interest groups and from various legal procedures. And that's why I think it's important. It's only one of several devices the government is intending to use. But I don't think anybody can doubt this and the previous government's serious intent to stop illegal migration. And I would urge everybody of goodwill and common sense in the country to get behind all the methods they are trying, because it is simply wrong that people try and queue huge jump by illegal boat journeys, that they put themselves at considerable risk. Above all, it is a disgrace that a group of get-rich-quick people operate these very dangerous boats and deliberately provoke the authorities in having to take over these people by putting them at such huge risk.
But John, what are the other methods? You say we should get behind all the methods. OK, we know about the Rwandan solution. What are the others? What are the other methods being considered?
Well, they're doing a lot of different things. I mean, they are seeking greater cooperation from the French, and people say it's not as good as it should be, but I think the government would say they're getting more cooperation now than before they began that, because most of these journeys start from France, and French authorities have the powers and they could do more to try and stop the boats leaving. There are more possible country deals in the way they've done with Albania, because you can take it case by case and negotiate solutions tailored to different groups of people. And what I do want to stress to everybody is that this country has a great heart and is extremely generous to many people who are genuinely fleeing autocracy or civil war or something worse. And we've just shown that again with two very large programs welcoming in people from Ukraine and from Hong Kong in the last year or so. So I do get fed up when people say we're not generous and we're not warm-hearted about this. But it must be wrong to allow these criminal gangs to make a fortune out of jeopardizing people's lives and running rings around the authorities on both sides of the channel.
Sir John, just on immigration more widely and legal migration, the 20-strong group of new Conservatives that have just set themselves up are really talking about the fact that they want legal migration to be down to a much lower number. Do you think Rishi Sunak will listen to them, and should he?
Well, I hope he will, because our manifesto in 2019 was pointing to lower levels of legal migration than we're currently experiencing. And I think for the sake of people already resident here who might like the jobs, there do need to be some changes. I mean, first of all, I don't think you should invite people into areas where it's difficult to attract people, allowing them to pay a discount to our current market rates when they bring them in. That's making the problem worse, because if the problem is low pay, putting British people off, if you're constantly undercutting the British rate, that makes it more difficult solving the problem in the future. And I do think these things should be emergency or short-term programs. We don't want to live perpetually in a model where in a whole series of jobs we have to rely on attracting migrant labour from abroad, when we've still got hundreds of thousands of people in Britain who, with the right training, support and encouragement, may well want to do these jobs, and where with some of these jobs they do need to be automated and to be made better jobs so that more people would think that's what they want to do.
We have as a guest on this programme a Scottish fruit farmer who says that the whereabouts, the geographical location of his farm is such that there are only about, I think it's 1,100 unemployed people in the vicinity, and most of them are disqualified from picking fruit for various reasons. One, they're too old. Two, they're infirm. Three, they couldn't afford to do it because it's only a part of the year job that doesn't pay you all the year round, and therefore physically, literally, there are insufficient humans here to pick the fruit. He needs to get fruit pickers in from abroad somehow. And I wonder whether that rolls out across the country much more frequently than we think it does. And it's not that we have a country full of reluctant fruit pickers, it's that there aren't enough people here who have the physical health and robustness required to pick the fruit. They may not have the will either, but they don't have the heft either. And so we do need to bring in people for things as basic as fruit picking and a great many other things, including to staff the NHS.
So I don't accept that. I mean, why do these people in this farm you describe, which may or may not have very few people locally, have to bring in people from overseas when there are millions of people around the United Kingdom that could also be invited to do these jobs? And presumably, if they're bringing in people from abroad, they are making housing provision available, because otherwise they couldn't invite them in. And so why can't that be offered to British people from elsewhere who may well wish to join in? And when it comes to the health plan, I mean, I've been one of those who've been pressing some time to have a proper manpower plan that has to be backed up, as the government says it's going to do, with proper training schemes and decent job definitions and gradings and so forth, to make these really desirable jobs and for more people to aspire to do them. But I think we should try and fill those jobs by training and encouraging people who are already settled here. I don't think it's at all a good thing to do to an emerging market country with relatively low incomes, to strip them of their qualified nurses, which they need, because we can offer them more money than they do.
Do we yet again come back to the pret-a-manger situation? Doesn't all of life somehow revert to pret-a-manger in some shape or form? And it's the story whereby there are plenty of people arriving in this country, often on coaches, who will be very delighted indeed to be recruited to cut the sandwiches and set them out at 4 o'clock in the morning at pret-a-manger. And lots of people in this country who, for many reasons, don't fancy it. And I've often interviewed the bosses at pret-a-manger who say, but of course we have a great structure here for preferment and promotion. You can easily become, if you work hard, in a relatively short time, a manager of a branch of pret-a-manger. Then you can manage several branches. Why is it that British people don't seem to understand this? We never know whether this is an accurate depiction or not of what's going on here. Do you think it is?
Well, you can help ministers and others get across this very important message that it may well be a very good thing for a young person to start off with a not very exciting job actually making the sandwiches in pret-a-manger, because they may well go on to be an assistant manager and a manager and have a very interesting career. Or there may be students who can offer some temporary or part-time opportunities. If you have enough of them, you can cover different hours when you need people available. Years ago when I was a student, I did fruit picking and I did some retail assistant work and those sort of things in the holidays. It was an extremely good experience. I needed the money. And it didn't interrupt my studies because I didn't do it in term time.